One day when I was an elementary schooler, I think probably 3rd or 4th grade, I was awoken by my mom in a rush. She had overslept, and since she always woke me up in the morning, this meant that I too overslept, and now there was just no way I was going to be ready for school early enough to get on the school bus. School started at 8 a.m., and my bus pickup time was 7 a.m., but it was already like 6:40 or something, and I was still in my pajamas and hadn't even had breakfast yet. So Mom decided that today, we would just tell the bus driver to go on ahead and she would take me to school, which would give me plenty of time to get ready. So I'm sitting there at the dining room table eating breakfast, still in my pajamas, and it's now about 6:50. We hear the bus pull up about 10 minutes earlier than usual. My mom peeks her head out of the door into the foggy morning and waves the bus on. She closes the door and comes back inside, but the bus doesn't pull away. There's a knock at the door, and Mom opens it to find a man in a bus driver uniform. He explains that he's a substitute driver because the regular driver called in sick. He says he knows he's a few minutes early, since he wanted to get an early start on the route since he didn't know it well. Mom explains to him that she was going to take me to school since we woke up late. He gets visibly upset and says that he can wait a few minutes since he's already running ahead of schedule. My mom insists that no, I won't be ready to go in a few minutes, and tells him to go on ahead. He seemed angry about this but turned around and got back in the bus and left. I returned to eating my breakfast and still don't have my school clothes on at this point. But at 7 a.m. sharp, another bus pulls up to my house. Mom thinks this is weird and goes outside to talk to them. She comes back inside looking terrified but doesn't really say anything about it and tells me to finish getting ready for school. At the time, I didn't know what happened, but Mom would end up telling me a few years later. When she went to this second bus, she found that it was being driven by my regular bus driver, and it was full of all the other kids that are usually on the route. The other bus was empty, by the way. Mom asks the driver about the substitute driver and about him calling in sick. I never called in sick. There is no substitute driver on my route, he says. The driver immediately called dispatch in a panic and told my mom to go inside and call the police, which she did, without me knowing, and report this incident. There was absolutely no one doing my driver's route that day. Whoever this was most likely a kidnapper who had targeted me. I never heard anything about it again. Not even if someone else had ended up being picked up by this mysterious fake bus driver. But chances are, had I gotten on that bus, I would have never made it to school or back home. And if Mom hadn't overslept on that specific day, I would have been on that bus. This story happened when I was 18 years old in 2007, flying a red-eye from Atlanta to LaGuardia Airport to work at a sleepaway summer camp. I was seated next to a 20-something-year-old male who started talking to me. He asked where I was going and about my plans, and told me he was a DJ. I explained I was going to work at a camp, and he asked where. I told him it was a few hours from the airport, and he offered to drive me. I said no, and that someone from the camp would be picking me up at 10 a.m. The flight was landing at 6 a.m. He then offered to drive me around and show me New York for a couple hours, which I also declined and said I would just wait for my ride at the airport. The drink service came, and I don't know exactly what happened. I went to the bathroom. I finished maybe half my drink. Then I promptly fell asleep for basically the entire flight. I woke up with my head in this guy's lap, and I was scared. Like I was fully bent forward and to the side with my head on his lap. I had never fallen asleep like that in a plane or car, and would never fall asleep on a stranger. I immediately went to sit up, and he held my head down for a sec and said I can keep sleeping, but I sat up and said I was going to the bathroom. When I sat back down, we were about to land. The flight attendant walked by and looked kind of concerned at me, but didn't say anything. I saw my unfinished drink on his tray table. He again offered to drive me around New York and show me cool DJ stuff, like clubs, and I said no and put in my headphones, got off the plane when it landed, and got myself food while I waited for my ride. To this day, I still think about it and wonder if I was almost trafficked. What would have happened if I drank the whole drink? I wish I would have reported it to the flight attendants and got him in trouble and changed seats. I was so young and naive, and I also think I wasn't thinking so clear at the time. But once my head cleared, I realized how messed up it was. This happened to me around a year ago, and it still haunts me. At the time, I was visiting some friends. It was the middle of the week, but I was on vacation, so I stayed out late. Around 1 o'clock or 1:30 a.m., I got in my car to head home about a 30-minute drive. I live in a small German town on a main street, but it's not very big. At night during the week, there's barely any traffic. Maybe 1 or 2 cars every now and then, that's it. I was driving home. It was a typical spring night. Everything was normal. I pulled into the driveway, stopped for a moment to open the garage door with my remote. Then I backed into my parking spot, which faces the entrance. I left the engine running as I rummaged in the center console. I can't even remember what for. Suddenly, when I looked up, there was a stranger standing there. A man maybe 45 years old, standing about 3 meters in front of my car inside the garage, just staring at me. I was instantly terrified. Reflexively, I hit the lock button on my car. He shouted that I should give him my phone, saying his car had broken down and he needed to make a call. But I hadn't seen any broken down car or flashing hazard lights anywhere on the road. No car pulled over. Nothing. I was so frozen in shock that I just stared at him. He seemed to notice how confused I was. He added that the breakdown happened the next town, which, by the way, is about an hour's walk away. Again, he told me to give him my phone, becoming louder and more aggressive. That's when I realized what he was wearing. Just knee-length checkered shorts and no shirt. It wasn't freezing outside, but it definitely wasn't warm enough to be standing around half naked. I yelled through the closed window that I couldn't help him and asked him to leave. He said, "You don't need to be afraid of me, just come and give me your phone." I told him I was sorry but no, and that he needed to leave. He stared for a moment longer, then angrily walked out of the garage. I stayed in my car until the garage door was fully closed. Only then did I turn off the engine. I wanted to call a friend, but there's no reception in that garage. So I grabbed my keys and every bit of courage I had and sprinted to the door, leading into the apartment hallway. It's a heavy door that jams sometimes. Thankfully, not that night. There's also a back entrance from outside to the garage, and I had no idea if that door was locked or if the man knew about it. Once inside, I ran to my ground floor apartment. The windows are somewhat shielded by a hedge, leading to my terrace, but technically it's still reachable from the street. Once inside, I locked everything, shut all the blinds, and just sat there for several minutes before calling a friend. I debated calling the police but didn't, thinking they had more urgent matters to deal with since actually the man hadn't done anything to me. Looking back, I realized that was a mistake. But honestly, I was just completely rattled. I'm usually someone who's happy to help people, but he easily could have asked me to call someone from outside, or knock on a door somewhere, or anything other than following a young woman into a garage at night, half naked. That's just a no. I've never seen him again, thankfully, but ever since that night, I hate parking there. I never get out of my car until the garage door is fully closed, and even then, I'm always on edge. I'm so grateful I kept the car running and locked the doors. I really don't want to imagine what could have happened if I hadn't. Where I live, the taxi system is actually well developed. You use an international rideshare app. Everyone has a verified ID, both drivers and passengers. There's a strict rating system, penalties for bad behavior, and everything feels traceable. Safe. At least it used to feel safe. Yesterday, I had to travel from one small town to another, passing through the city. I booked a ride like I always do, but something felt off the moment I opened the app. The car's location was bouncing all over the map, as if it was glitching. I chalked it up to bad GPS. Those things happen. Eventually, the car pulled up and I got in. That's when I noticed the first red flag. The driver didn't start the ride in the app. He wasn't even marked as awaiting a passenger. Some drivers do that to stretch the clock a bit and earn more, so I tried to ignore it. But then he started driving and not in the direction I expected. It wasn't a shortcut. It wasn't traffic avoidance. It was the complete opposite direction. I even had a strange thought, almost like a joke in my head. What if he just started driving out to the suburbs instead of the city center? But when I looked up, that's exactly what he was doing. From the moment I got in, he hadn't said a single word, and it became painfully clear this was no mistake. He still hadn't started the ride in the app. We were now completely off course. I was alone in the car with this man, no idea where we were headed, and I felt frozen. I finally managed to ask, "Excuse me, what route are you taking? I don't need to go that way." He didn't respond. He just looked in the mirror, turned abruptly, and started heading the correct direction. Then, finally, he tapped the screen to start the ride. His expression was cold, angry, and he stayed that way for the rest of the hour-long trip. Even though we were now going toward the right place, he refused to follow the GPS route. He kept veering into unfamiliar side roads, taking strange turns. It was like he wanted to stay away from any major streets, like he didn't want to be seen. As we got closer to the destination, he started messing with the route again, slowing down, circling blocks. That's when I picked up my phone and called a friend. Loud enough for the driver to hear, I said, "Yeah, I'm almost there, just a few more minutes." I wanted him to know someone was waiting for me, someone expecting me. He still said nothing. When we finally pulled up, I jumped out of that car before it even came to a full stop. I was shaking. My legs could barely hold me. I know people will say I overreacted, that maybe he was just trying to take the long way around to get more money. But I know what I felt in that car. I know how his silence felt, thick like the calm before something awful. What if I hadn't spoken up? What if I didn't have GPS? What if I didn't already know the way? I reported everything to the app. Not sure what good it'll do. But to that driver, whoever you are, let's not meet again. I was born in 2000, grew up in a small town in Northeast Ohio. We had one of those little ranch-style houses, all on one floor, 3 bedrooms. It was just me and my mom for most of my life. My dad left when I was a baby. She was a good mom from what I remember. We didn't have much money, but she made sure I always had what I needed. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant in the center of town. Always tired, but always kind. We'd watch movies together at night. She'd tuck me in, kiss my forehead, and tell me she loved me. I felt safe, except at bedtime. I must have been about 6 or 7 the first time I noticed it. One night after she tucked me in, I heard the floor creak after she turned off the light. Not out in the hall, right by my bed. I remember freezing, listening. Then I heard the sound of her breathing. Slow, heavy, right underneath me. I leaned over the edge and whispered, "Mom?" She didn't answer. Just this soft little giggle, not mean, not playful, just weird. I called for her louder. After a few seconds, she crawled out from under the bed like it was the most normal thing in the world, smiled at me and said, "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Mommy's here." Then she left the room. The next night, same thing. I heard her crawl under right after lights out. The soft thud of her knees and hands against the floorboards, the shift of the mattress as she settled in. Then the breathing. I was too little to really question it. I thought maybe it was just a game she liked to play. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't a game. It became a routine. She'd tuck me in like normal, turn off the light, and then she'd get under the bed every single night. And then she started doing little things. She would tap on the wood under my mattress in these odd rhythms. 3 taps, then 2, then 4. Sometimes it sounded almost like a song, other times like random patterns. If I moved or sat up, she'd stop until I lay back down. A couple times I caught her peeking out from the foot of the bed. I'd feel eyes on me and look down, and there she was. Her face just visible in the dark, one eye glinting in the faint light from the hall. No expression, just watching. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie stiff under the covers, too afraid to move or call for her. If I tried to leave the bed, she'd grab my ankle. Not hard, just enough to stop me. Then she'd giggle again, that same soft, weird giggle. I never told anyone. How do you explain something like that when you're a kid? I figured no one would believe me. It wasn't every night that something scary happened. Some nights she'd just lie there quietly. I'd hear her whispering to herself sometimes, words I couldn't make out, soft and steady, like she was talking to someone I couldn't hear. This went on for years. During the day, she was totally normal. Made my lunch, helped with homework, joked with me, hugged me. I remember trying to work up the courage to ask her about it once when I was around 10. I said something dumb like, "Mom, why do you sleep under my bed?" She just blinked at me and smiled. "Oh, buddy, I don't do that. You must be having silly dreams." But that night she was there again and the tapping was louder. By the time I was 9 or 10, I stopped looking under the bed. I started sleeping on the couch when I could get away with it. Eventually, when I turned 11, she told me I was old enough to have a lock on my door. She never came back into my room. I don't know why she did it. I don't know what changed. She passed away when I was 23. She had cancer. In her last weeks, she was confused a lot of the time, drifting in and out. But one night, when I was sitting by her bed, she grabbed my wrist and said very clearly, "I kept you safe, you know? You were never alone at night." I still don't understand what she meant.